What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt back here with Mike Kaye for the Game of Thrones cooking podcast, where we discuss how you make hot pies, direwolf bread.
It's going to be extensive, so I hope you have your...
We're also recording on video, so you can...
I hope you have your flour ready.
I would listen to that. If Hot Pie just did a podcast about cooking, for anyone who doesn't watch Game of Thrones, or listen to it, they don't know what we're talking about.
He's low-key the best gossiper in the entire Westeros setup, too, so I think that would be really good. But anyway...
Game of Thrones is back on Sunday.
Yeah, Game of Thrones is back. You're listening to the No Huddle Show podcast.
Game of Thrones... Sorry, I can't. But yeah, we have Game of Thrones on the mind, but we're back. We took a week off. There wasn't really that much going on. There's still not that much going on. A lot of draft stuff. This is going to be primarily a mailbag podcast. We'll cover some stuff in the beginning, but we just want to get back in the mix. The draft is in 2 weeks now. I'm ready for it to finally get here. It's so much speculation, and in the reality, the Eagles have probably been at the same mindset the entire time. Like, nothing's changed, but everybody seems to be changing their opinions about... I mean, we were just talking before. I think I change my mind every other week about what I think they're going to do in the first round, and I haven't really settled on anything yet.
Well, and I think even in our reporting, right, we've... I reported earlier in the offseason that they were looking into veteran quarterbacks.
Never happened.
It didn't happen because they valued the quarterback position at a certain price, and it didn't work out happening. So I think what's happening is people aren't just changing their minds because, oh my God, we don't know what's going on. I think the Eagles are just sitting back and waiting to get the best available player. If you look at like what they did with Jordan Howard, it seemed like they had that deal on the table for a while, and once the running back market didn't match up with what they wanted, they pounced. Zendejo, a lot of people were talking about them having interest in free agent safeties. They waited it out and brought in Zendejo, whatever.
But we'll talk about him in a second. But
you get what I'm saying.
I haven't taken by him.
I think there's a reason why everybody's changing their opinions, and it's not that they're wrong. It's not that they're not using logic. It's
developing.
It's just very developing because the Eagles and Howie Roseman have been very patient, and they're just sitting back and watching. You know what I mean? Like they're waiting to see what happens, and they're in a position to take the best available players in every round that they're in.
And we've talked a lot on here about how that much they think about compensatory picks. One thing we haven't really talked about is that there's a date that, like, if players are signed after May 7th, if they're signed after that date, they don't count towards the comp pick formula. So, and teams are kind of wising up to that now, which is why you've seen, like, a lull in free agent signings and why guys like Timmy Jernigan, Jay Ajayi, Stefan Wisniewski haven't signed anywhere yet. And that's relevant, and I wrote a little bit about this earlier this week, because as of right now, they're only going to get 2 comp picks because of Sendejo and LJ Fort canceling out the guys they've lost. Mm-hmm. So, if it gets to May 7th and none of these other guys sign, I don't think Andrew Sendejo is going to be a lock to make this team anymore, especially if they draft a safety, which I think is a real possibility. So all of a sudden you have Trey Sullivan, you have him, you have Andrew Sendejo, and then they're ultimately going to have to decide, do you want to keep Andrew Sendejo or do you want to get a 4th-round pick next year for losing Jordan Hicks? And I think a 4th-round pick next year is more valuable than Andrew Sendejo right now. Yeah, if he comes into camp and has a great camp, like you keep him around, you keep good players around. But he's not like the lock that you would think.
Yeah, he's competing against value, right? So you can have him in training camp if he makes the 53-man run. Here's the thing, too, that's also weighing against him. He's a veteran. If he makes the roster initially in week 1, his salary becomes fully guaranteed. So I'm wondering if Zendejo's a guy that you have during training camp, and then you cut him, and then maybe bring him back in week 2.
Like those receiver guys they did last year.
Right. That way it benefits you in a way.
That's true, and then it probably wouldn't count towards the comp pick formula at that point.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So, because you're risking him out on the free agent market for a week. Again, I think that the Eagles have played this perfectly, and I'm not trying to compliment them too much because there have been probably missteps on paper, but at least from their approach, they've been solid in their approach. They haven't really wavered from it, and they've really targeted guys that won't mess with the compensatory pick formula outside of, obviously, LJ Fort and Zendejo. The guys they brought in, though, recently from the Alliance of American Football intrigued me. They brought in 2 wide receivers. They re-signed Greg Ward, who's been here the last 2 off seasons. Then they also signed 30-year-old Charles Johnson, who played very, very well in the NFL.
He has more experience than Gibson or Mac Hollins in the NFL.
Right.
He started for 3 years with the Vikings. He wasn't all that productive, but he has experience.
Right, he's been around. And then they brought in quarterback Luis Perez, who was with the Rams during camp last year.
Didn't play football in high school, by the way. That's
right,
crazy.
Yeah, he learned a lot of his technique from YouTube. It's like a very
like Joel
weird,
Embiid style thing.
He's the new like Alex Tanny.
And there's like a story about how he thought about going into professional bowling. Like it's kind of like a fun. The odds of him making the roster are long, but he's going to get a lot of chances to play because number one, Nate Sudfeld hasn't signed his restricted free agent tender yet. We don't know if Carson Wentz is going to be ready for OTAs. So offseason workouts start on Monday, by the way. So he's going to be a guy that's going to be in camp with them. He's going to get an opportunity to show teams around the league that he can play. So we'll see him in the preseason. He'll be an extra arm in training camp. Like it was a smart move for both him and the Eagles to like bring a guy like that, low risk, high reward type thing.
Well, and I think too, I remarked about this when he was kind of setting the AAF on fire the first 3 weeks. He's like the perfect developmental West Coast quarterback. I wrote that I would love to see him in an Andy Reid offense. I mean, Doug Peterson's offense is relatively similar. If he can get with a quarterback guru who can kind of teach him how to play the position from a professional standpoint, I think he's in really good shape. He only got to play in one preseason game last year with the Rams. Showed some really good stuff early on with the Birmingham Iron. Then he kind of like fell off a cliff when teams started to figure him out defensively. Look, if he's the practice squad quarterback, that's fine. This doesn't hinder you from drafting somebody. And I think they will draft a quarterback. So that's probably something that we also want to talk about, is the potential of drafting a quarterback and why it makes sense. Because you wrote a great article about it earlier in the week.
Yeah, Jeffrey Lurie at the owners' meetings, he said this in the past, but he was like, we want to be drafting a quarterback, if not every year, then every other year. And the Eagles have those 4 day 3 picks. I would think they would use one of those on a quarterback if they were going to. It all depends on value and who's there and if they like certain guys a certain way. There are a few guys that intrigue me. I think we talked about this on the podcast a couple weeks ago. A guy like Tyree Jackson is a project that would make a lot of sense for them. It ultimately just comes down to what they do with their first few picks and how their board kind of shakes out and whether they make any trade-ups, because then you lose draft picks. I think we both think they're going to trade up or down from number 25 is kind of our general feeling, and they might try and trade back into the third round in some way.
And drafting quarterback every year is something that a lot of teams have implemented. It's the Ron Wolf strategy where, when he was in Green Bay, he drafted a quarterback every single year. That's smart because that's the most important position. You've also proven that you can develop quarterbacks. Nate Sudfeld's a guy who I think training camp there's a major injury. If you can get a third-round pick for him, I think that you got value there. I mean, they really lucked out on him. But again, I think Perez is a guy that has some upside. He makes a little bit of sense. He's a smaller quarterback. So we'll see if he actually ever gets any action. He also costs nothing. Nate Sudfeld's relatively cheap when you compare him to Nick Foles at $2.9 million with that restricted tender. But I like Jarrett Stidham from Auburn. I'm a big Minshew fan from Washington State. Everybody I've talked to just loves his personality, thinks he's like a very capable backup developmental quarterback long term. And I think you need a long-term backup for Carson Wentz. I think Carson needs to have a Jim Sorgi or a Curtis Painter, a guy that he can rely on constantly day in and day out, who can be his understudy. Now, you would hope that they would be more talented than Sorgi or Painter, but you want a guy that you can depend on, a Brian Hoyer-esque guy.
Yeah, it is notable that the Eagles haven't brought any quarterbacks in for official visits, though that's not really that surprising because they only get 25 of them. They will apparently be watching Trace McSorley at their local pro day. He's going to be at that. He's an intriguing, athletic guy. He's not a guy you probably want to use a draft pick on, to be honest. But
yeah, I was at Penn State's pro day, and he's pretty adamant that he wants to be a quarterback.
Yeah,
he made really good throws.
He's an intriguing athlete, and he brings something different that they don't have really.
He connected on 49 of 53 throws at the pro day, if I'm not mistaken, and he showed a nice amount of range. I think he's a guy that could be a developer. I mean, he's a guy that would battle with Luis Perez to be the number 3 guy. It's not going to be, you're not going to draft this guy and have him come in and be competing with Nate Sudfeld. I think he's very intriguing. I don't know if he'll necessarily throw at this local day workout, but, we'll see what happens.
But, so speaking of those visits, just before we get into the mailbag, they've had, I believe, 21 of the 25 have been reported, and One thing that stood out to me in particular, and it's the receivers they've been bringing in for official visits. They brought in A.J. Brown and N'Keal Harry, McCole Hardman, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Paris Campbell, and Jalen Hurd. The majority of those guys are slot receivers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that says a lot about what they feel about Nelson Aguilar and how they plan to go forward in that position. I don't know if this means they're going to get rid of him now, but it seems increasingly unlikely he's back here next year.
I mean, it's impossible to re-sign him if you're going to sign Carson Wentz.
And if these are guys that are, a few of them are projected second-round picks, a few of them are fourth-round picks, it seems like they're going to draft a receiver in that 2 to 4 range.
Yeah, and I think they should. I think that's a smart bet. I mean, if they don't, I think I like this wide receiver class more than a lot of other people. I'm a big Gary Jennings fan, and I think he goes in the 5th, 6th round. But yeah, it seems like they want big-bodied dudes.
Slots, yeah.
And I think that's smart. I mean, they were successful with Jordan Matthews for several years, with Chip Kelly doing that. And remember, Nelson wasn't a guy who was drafted by Howie Roseman. They've kept him around. But I don't know if he's necessarily still a lock to be here this season. I mean, when you look at how much they've kind of tried to figure out this wide receiver position, it just kind of seems open-ended.
If they draft like N'Keal Harry or A.J. Brown in the second round and like to trade up and get one of those guys, then I would say the percentage chance of Nelson Aguilar being traded before the season goes way up.
Yeah, I would agree completely. I mean, I think they'll be creative with the wide receiver position. It's something that like when you have the two guys on the outside like Deshaun and Alshon, you have some wiggle room to be creative with the slot receiver position. You have some wiggle room to have the tight end position be a little bit more dynamic. And again, I think they're going to run a lot of 12 personnel this year. So having those two guys on the outside, you have the wiggle room to bring in a rookie and have him start in the slot.
I agree. All right, let's get into the mailbag. So there are some Game of Thrones questions on here. People did creatively tie it to the Eagles a few ways. If you're not a Game of Thrones fan, you might want to fast forward through those, but we're gonna answer every question I got. All right, you ready?
Go for it.
All right, let's see where we're just gonna start. We won't start with Game of Thrones. All right, definitely not a fan-friendly. This is from Chase Colt. Definitely not a fan-friendly move, but what is the likelihood of a trade back if top defensive tackle, defensive end, offensive line are gone, and how far back would you expect?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. There's a lot to dig in there.
Basically, if the top defensive or offensive linemen are gone at 25, how far back do you think they would trade back, and how far back do you think they would go?
I think you play the rule of sixes. If you're willing to trade up 6 spots, or you're willing to trade back 6 spots. I think that's smart when you're in the first round, because that's the difference between a third-round pick and what have you. And I think trading back probably like 6 picks. You and I talked about it off the air, like trying to get into the early 30s. I think that's a smart move, because you don't want to trade back too far where the Giants are picking at 37 and they can kind of control as to what you do, because they have very similar needs. You don't want to play into a division foe's draft consideration. So I think if you can trade back 6 spots, pick up a third-round pick, go for it, especially if you've got a guy like Jerry Tillery who you really like, who could be sitting there at 31.
Or Chauncey Gardner-Johnson even.
Right.
The team that I have my eye on is the Patriots, who have, I think, 3 third-round picks because they've gotten a lot of comp picks. So you trade back to 32, pick up an extra third, still get a guy you like, probably at 25. All right. Do you believe the Eagles will target Miles Sanders in the second round? I do not.
I do.
You do think they will? I don't think they're drafting a running back. I don't think they're drafting a running back in the first 2 days, and I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't draft one at all. That's my take.
The question to me is, will Miles Sanders be there when they get to pick?
Late 50s. Yeah.
I
think he will, and I don't think they pick him personally.
I think if they were to take a guy in the second round, it would be Miles Sanders.
Okay.
So if that answers the question, if he's there at 53 and the board shakes up the way I think it will, he's going to be of consideration. They've been very heavily vetting this guy, like probably more so than most players that they've vetted. It hasn't just been the smoke screen. So, they need a guy who can catch out of the backfield. They need a guy who can be quicker. They want to pair a guy that's kind of more versatile, probably with Jordan Howard, I'd imagine. And I think he's a good mix of Corey Clement and Jordan Howard, and that's why I kind of like him as a fit there.
Yeah. I purely base this on Howie Roseman's history, and they haven't used a second-round pick on a running back since LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah, it's not an easy sell for sure.
Yeah. So it's one of those, like, you can't fool me 3 times kind of thing. This is from Chris Wilson 23. When Ronald Darby returns to full health, we're assuming he walks into a role at outside cornerback. How on earth could Jim Schwartz justify letting Jalen Mills man cornerback 2 over Avonte Maddox? And in your eyes, will he? So basically, how on earth could Jim Schwartz start Jalen Mills again is the question.
I mean, Jalen Mills gets to dictate what side of he covers, too. So it's not just that he's cornerback 2, he's cornerback 1B.
Yeah, if he's healthy, I think it's going to be the same 2 starters as last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to at least feign a competition between him and Maddox. That said, I would say that Mills is probably stranglehold in the starting job is probably less...
As small as it's been, at least.
Right, because, he's on the last year of his deal, and Avonte Maddox was brilliant for the closeout of the season, had some struggles in the playoffs. I'm fascinated what they're going to do at nickel, because they really...
A lot of options there.
There's a lot of options. Crayvon LeBlanc was fantastic in spot duty. Who called it? And... Avonte Maddox is a guy who can play nickel and play nickel well.
Sidney Jones started there last year.
Yeah, I mean, you've got those 3 guys, and then you wonder what they're going to do at safety, because that could impact where Maddox plays. So we're really like kind of in like an unknown area at that 3rd safety nickel spot.
We might not even really know until part training camp, part preseason, part week 1. Like, we're not going to know the answer to that question until week 1, really.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, is...
Unless they draft another guy, then you assume they're going to trade one of these guys out.
So I've said this with our coverage of like, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Darnell Savage. Those are guys that can play nickel ordinarily, so it basically defeats the purpose of having a big nickel. You could have a guy that just plays there the entire time, which I think ideally you'd want, because they have the combination of safety and nickel, and I think that's what Avonte Maddox could be too. So as much as a lot of people want to press on the safety need, they need a safety. They need a future guy at free safety, because Rodney McLeod, A, is coming off a major knee surgery, and B, is going to be a free agent next year. They need to draft a safety for 2020 for sure, but 2019 they need that insurance. So I think they're in like a very weird spot. And the good news is they have somebody on the roster who can fix it. It might not be the ideal fix, but they do have somebody on the roster who can fix it for Maddox.
For sure. All right. At Loot Cakes asks, do you think the extra comp picks next year will make them more aggressive moving up this year? I think that makes a lot of it. Ultimately comes down to if there's a guy that, because I don't think they're trading to the top 10, because unless they traded both their second round picks, which I don't think Howie's going to want to do. So if there's like an offensive lineman that they really, really like Jawan Taylor falls farther than expected or something, I could see them moving up to like 15 to try and get them, and you can trade some future picks in that scenario. I don't think they're going to go. I think in my mock draft I had them going up to number 20. I think the like 18 to 21 range is a realistic expectation if they're going to trade up. Like, I don't think they're going to go much higher than that.
Yeah, like I said, the rule of 6s, I think that's the smart range to be in. To answer that question, they've already been more aggressive because of those comp picks. When you look at
player acquisition,
trading for Jordan Howard,
Juwan Howard.
Hey, fun K fact: I have an original Washington Wizards Juwan Howard jersey that somebody bought for me. I don't know why. I think he was on the team for like a year.
That's hilarious.
So trading for Jordan Howard, trading for Alshon Jackson, they've been a lot more aggressive in dealing 2020 picks because they know they're going to get that replenished, or think they're going to get replenished with compensatory picks. Hey, Sendejo.
Yeah. All right. Actually, I really like this question. At For My Last Name, more likely to happen this season: Alshon restructures his contract, Crayvon LeBlanc gets an extension, or Howie trades Nelson Aguilar this season? I think that's a very interesting question. I went with the LeBlanc extension, but I'm the way they've been working out all these slot receivers, I might even lean Aguilar now. I don't know. It's a tough one.
The obvious one to me is Alshon. I think Alshon.
But if they do that, I'm not as convinced that they're going to keep him beyond the next 2 years. And if you're restructuring him, then you're adding money to an extra year. You know what I mean?
Sure,
I'm less convinced about his long-term viability here.
So I think if you're counting this year and the 2 years after that, then you're good.
Well, when does his contract run until?
Here, I can look that up.
But yeah, you and I both think they're going to give LeBlanc an extension. I think it depends on him starting off the season as well as he ended last year, though.
Well, I think it depends on... I think he gets an extension out of training camp. I think that's...
You think that early, really?
Yeah, because that's the time to buy low on him. Because if he has...
Yeah, because then if he starts really, then he's like, why would I sign this? Yeah.
So his contract runs through 2021. As it is, they can start saving money on him as of 2020. They can save $10 million. By 2021, they can save $13 million by cutting him. So for a restructure, what you would essentially probably do is give him more guaranteed money, because he has no guaranteed money after this year.
Okay. So that's why I'm not sure if they would restructure.
But the reason why he would want to restructure is the guaranteed money. And if they can lower his cap number next year for Carson, that makes sense.
See, I think for him, it depends on him staying healthy at the begining of the season kind of thing.
For
probably.
Sure.
So that'll be more from the Eagles' perspective if they want to do it or not.
Yeah, if they restructured his contract, it'd probably be mid-season, if I had to guess.
All right, this one's like a combo Eagles Game of Thrones question at the Chubby Don. Some good Twitter names on here.
Yeah, really. That's better than my Twitter
I'm not going to read the whole question, but basically he's asking, like, of these Game of Thrones characters I'm about to list, who would you want to be like your two-man running back field?
Okay.
We got Jaime Lannister, two-handed Jaime Lannister, he makes sure to say. So Jaime Lannister with both his hands, Jon Snow, Jorah, Grey Worm, or Tormund. Let's hear what your answer is, because I responded to him with my answer.
So Tormund and Grey Worm, duh.
I said Tormund and Jon Snow is like a thunder lightning kind of situation.
But like, I think that, you know...
Grey Worm's quick.
Grey Worm's quick. He's elusive. He's
got like the Darren Sproles size.
Yeah, he's small. He's kind of like... He's built like a Tony Pollard from Memphis kind of guy. And what I like about Tormund is he can be my short yardage LeGarrette Blount style running back. So
Tormund for sure is running through dudes.
Right.
He's not running around them. He's running through them.
I mean, I could probably put him as my sixth offensive lineman too in certain situations. So I think he's like 6'6". So those would be my guys. I also really think that you know, Grey Worm's balance and wind resistance.
You see the smile on Mike's face right now, too. He's like so happy talking about it.
I won't get into this on the podcast, but he's very aerodynamic for several reasons.
If you watch the show, you know what I mean.
And so, I mean, he also doesn't have the baggage that a lot of other running backs would come with. Actually, we don't know that, you know, but I think that's the ideal pairing.
All right, we'll go back to a more serious Eagles question. Okay, this is a good one. At B. Walker NFL, which position doesn't get addressed in the draft by the Eagles?
Tight end.
Yeah,
there's literally no reason.
What about like a less obvious one? If you had to pick like linebacker, yeah, that would be. They haven't brought in any linebackers for visits.
Well,
which it doesn't necessarily always portend what they're going to do. But
this linebacker class is not good.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's some like late round guys that are like intriguing, but do you really need to draft a guy like that? You can just sign.
I like a guy like Trey Watson from Maryland. I think he's a good story, but he's also like a really good Sam linebacker. Prospect.
Just knowing how he's more likely to draft like an interior offensive lineman there than a
right. I think you're better off going into undrafted free agency, because I don't think the drop off. Look, there's 2 Devons in this draft, and there's no one else outside of, maybe Mac Wilson is a guy that you like in the day 3 range. The day 2 range in the 3rd round, but nope.
Yeah. All right. At @mleader_3, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Cleveland Farrell, or Chris Lindstrom. Which do you think is the more likely pick at 25? So if they're all, let's say in this scenario,
who was the first one? I'm sorry.
Cleveland Farrell. Oh, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Sorry.
Gotcha.
So let's say they're all 3 of them are available, but it's probably Farrell. But I don't think he's going to be there. So I think Lindstrom would be the second most likely out of that group. I think they really like Lindstrom.
Yeah, I think Lindstrom makes a lot of sense, especially if
he's an athletic guy who can play multiple positions on the offensive line. He can start for Brooks in the beginning, maybe push Sayamalo.
If they project him that he can potentially play at tackle, then absolutely. Yeah, no doubt.
Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, if they're drafting a safety in first round, it's probably him, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I really like him.
Mm-hmm.
He's the kind of guy that can make an impact this season. Let's see here. Will they really just give Jalen Mills a starting spot? Like, are they really going to do that again?
So here, let's talk about that. So from our perspective, covering the team, having no emotional investment whatsoever, if they said, hey, Ronald Darby's going to start on PUP. We want a guy with experience to start at corner. So we are making Jalen Mills a starting corner. What's your take on that? Because for me, that makes sense if they want
in the scenario where Darby's not in the lineup, you're saying?
Which is what I think will potentially happen.
If he's not PUP, then at least like the first 2 weeks or something like
that.
Yeah.
Right. I could see it being like an Alshon Jeffery thing.
Where somebody reports that he's going on PUP and he doesn't, and then he plays a couple weeks after that.
Hey, we're not taking shots here, but like where he sits for 3 days and realistically has to miss games, I think that makes a lot of sense. So what's your take on that?
I think that makes sense. So what makes sense and what they will or won't do are two different conversations, obviously. But so in that scenario, who do you think would start on the other side?
Maddox. It wouldn't be.
You think it would be Maddox on the outside?
Yeah, we've seen how they feel.
What I would do is I would put Rasul on the other outside and put Maddox in the nickel and play those three guys. But they're probably going to do Maddox, Mills, and Cindy Jones would be my guess.
Yeah,
or Cravon LeBlanc, of course. Yeah.
So like my whole thing is, and I've gotten flack for this, but take Sidney Jones out of the equation. Okay, whatever you get from him, if he comes on and he's incredible in camp, then you can start talking about him. But until you see that he can stay healthy, he doesn't matter. Rasul Douglas is a guy that you just keep on the sideline, even though you and I have said, I actually think at worst he's their second best corner on this roster. Because the debate really to me is either or Darby healthy or Maddox at that top spot. So maybe he's at worst the third. But, like, again, if they feel comfortable with Mills for certain structural reasons...
And because he can tackle or whatever.
And because he can tackle, even though his tackling numbers were terrible last year, you have to have a justification. Move on from Rasul and get value for him now, if that's the... You know what I mean? Like... And I think he's the most movable guy in this draft. More so movable than Nelson.
Wait, Rasul, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think he has more value almost than Nelson.
Probably
because of the contract.
Yeah, because he doesn't cost much.
Yeah, because Nelson is that 9.4 guaranteed no matter what in a trade. So, actually, I like this one. It's a little more fun. Who's your prediction for the Week 1 opponent from @Drew B. Bayless?
I was trying to think about this the other day.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I don't think it'll be an AFC team, so let's take that one out of there.
Wouldn't be like...
I'm gonna say in Buffalo, Week 1.
I guess that's better than us going there in December.
In Buffalo,
I was trying to think of one of their... Because the Vikings one is probably going to be Thanksgiving, it sounds like. So we're going to be...
I think they're going to be on the road, for sure.
Okay. Because I don't think Green Bay will be the first one.
Well, they've been at home... They were at home
They were home last year against the Falcons. I don't know what they were the year before that. The Dolphins won't be Week 1.
I don't think it'll be an AFC team. Like, that's rarely done.
That's pretty rare, right?
Yeah.
So who are the other... I'm blanking on the other NFC teams they're playing against. Falcons?
Yeah, they play against
they played them last year in Week 1. Would they do that 2 years in a row would be the thing.
Yeah, I doubt it.
So I guess the Buffalo Bills makes... Well, that's AFC, though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, that's true. But, all right, so I'm a hypocrite. I'm going to go with the... I don't think it'll be Miami, is what I mean. I think Miami will be later in the year. But I think it'll be Buffalo. I think it'll be Buffalo, or it'll be a division game.
Do they do division games in Week 1?
Sometimes. Not often, but they do. Yeah, like, they started off against the Redskins in Washington in 2017.
What about, like, the Jets Week 1?
They were playing them in the preseason, so I would be
true.
Although they did that once with the Browns.
Back-to-back weeks like that?
Not back-to-back weeks, but I think
because they get the Jets in Week 4. So.
Right.
That would be kind of funny.
I'd be happy with it.
Yeah,
you get that. That's basically
out of the way.
That's basically a home game right there.
East Rutherford. We have to go back again later in the year, obviously. But
yeah, but I think the Bills makes the.
Right. I can dig it. The Bills.
Yeah. No, the Jets game's at home because they go to Miami and they go to Buffalo. The Jets game's at home and the Patriots game's at home.
Oh, you're right. The Jets game on the road is the preseason game.
Right, yeah.
But we're going to East Rutherford twice this year, basically.
Yes.
All right.
Wouldn't mind getting a division game out of the way. I think that kind of be... Especially Washington, if we can get that road trip out of the way.
Yeah, true. Without the Washington road trip, yeah. We haven't. The road trip schedule's not as exciting this year. I'll say that.
Listen,
I don't want to be on here complaining because we get to travel all these places. We get to go to Lambeau, but in terms of like just weather and like travel destinations, even for the fans, it's not as good as last year. Like that's not debatable.
Right. Well, yeah, we got to go to LA and London. That's
Nashville and
yeah.
Let's see here. What do we got?
Oh God.
What?
Wait till you hear about what the title of the new Star Wars movie is.
Oh God. The
Rise of Skywalker.
What? Aren't all the Skywalkers dead? This is a Star Wars podcast now. Let's see. There's some other ones on here that were good.
Wait, this is not a joke. It's called The Rise of Skywalker. What?
All right. Actually, from our friend Michael Kist, he said, "Give me your round one shockers." I think he meant like generally for the NFL. I said Daniel Jones going 6 to the Giants is my shocking pick that I think could happen because that seems like a dumb sort of thing the Giants would do.
Yeah, but it's such an obvious connection, though. So is that really like that?
Number 6 overall. I guess that's not shocking.
Like them taking Kyler Murray would be a shock to me because I don't really think he's. I mean, there's been so many reports that he's too small.
I mean, more shocking they didn't go number 1. Honestly,
yeah.
Like, what would be shocking?
I think the Patriots are going to make a Julio. I think they're going to make a Julio Jones-like trade where the Falcons were a playoff team that traded up all the way into the top 10 to draft Julio Jones. I think the Patriots are going to trade up from 32 to kind of like the mid-teens to get a wide receiver.
Like DK Metcalf or something?
Yeah, so whoever they have is their top wide receiver on the list.
I think they would trade up for even. They don't really.
They have 100 third-round picks.
Yeah, that's true. They also never use assets on wide receivers like ever.
Right.
Like, they're like Eagles with running backs. Like they just try and find the shortest white guy they can.
Either that or they trade up for...
Like they're going to get Andy Isabella. Like he's going to be a Patriot.
Right. Well, or that or they trade up for TJ Hawkinson. Yeah. If he falls.
All right, and we can end on... Oh, here's one. Should the Eagles make a trade up for Ed Oliver? Should and will are two different things. Should, it depends.
When?
It depends on when. So if he falls to 13... Like
no.
You think that's too high?
Yeah.
For them to move? Like, they wouldn't have that.
I like Ed Oliver.
Or you just don't think he's worth it?
No, I don't like...
I would move up to 13 for him.
Ed Oliver's such a weird prospect, and like those weird prospects can sometimes be like very, you've got to win now. Even though you don't really have the needs to, I guess you could focus on developing him first. I just don't love going up 12 picks because that's going to cost you a 1. It's definitely going to cost you a 1.
You mean like a future 1?
Yeah, a future 1 for sure. For 12 picks, yeah. In the first round, yeah.
I mean, they do have 2 second-round picks, though.
So you're going to trade...
I'm not saying I don't... If that's what it takes, then maybe not. I don't know.
That could maybe be what the deal is. You trade your 2 second-round picks and a first-round pick. Let me guess, your brother just texted you.
No, I got to... So I tweeted that. I already know that Howie Roseman is going to make a trade in the middle of the Game of Thrones premiere. And our great friend Les Bowen said... where'd it go? It just disappeared. He said... Howie and Lannister is what...
Yep.
That made me laugh in the middle. Les Bowen is full of Game of Thrones jokes.
We're going to have Les Bowen on the podcast.
We should, honestly.
We should. Hey, you know what? He's never on the other one.
We'll end on a Game of Thrones question, just for fun. People who don't like Game of Thrones can probably tune out at this point. But this ties to the Eagles.
You're not playing to the listener. What do you?
But the people that love Game of Thrones are all in.
All right. What do you got?
Adley Sifford says the Eagles could recruit any current or past Game of Thrones character. Who would they take and what position would he play? I like the Hound as a defensive end.
I would say Rob Stark because he's really good for the locker room and he's very
really like Rob Stark.
Yeah, I really do.
He's great in the bodyguard.
He's good. He's good for the locker room. I think he'd be brilliant.
Now, who would your actual pick be?
He'd be a brilliant backup quarterback. My actual pick.
Somebody suggested the Mountain yesterday, but as like an offensive lineman, but he would just be getting unnecessary roughness penalties like every 10 seconds. He would get kicked out of every game.
I gotta think of like a logical. Dario Naharis.
As what? Like a running back or something?
No, a tight end. A tight end. He's he's multiversed. I don't know, man. Like that's such a tough like.
That's why you go with the big boys. Hound would just get
that's just too obvious.
Hound would get like 15 sacks. The Eagles love linemen.
Yeah, it's true. I guess that's fair. All right, I'll
think Howie's strategy. I
think Tormund's like the perfect pick, though. Like, I mean, he's
a great goal line back. I think he'd be great at that.
I think he could.
I'm all in on that idea.
I think he could be, like a Chuck Bednarik, where he could be an ultimate
with
Iron
a beard,
Man.
with a red beard.
I mean, they already have a guy who looks like him on the roster who plays pretty well. His name's Chris Long, but what can you do?
There you go. All right, we'll end on that note.
We're going to go watch this ridiculous Star Wars trailer that's getting so much buzz.
This is the most we've nerded out on a podcast, so you guys are seeing our true colors a little bit. This is most of our conversations off the air. So we'll end on that note. If you guys have any other questions or Game of Thrones theories, send them our way, and we'll talk about them on our next podcast. On Tuesday, we'll be at NovaCare, and we'll talk to you guys then. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.